take off. Well, great. I appreciate everybody's time today. I'm going to talk a little bit about multimedia to 911. I think in the same spirit of Mark's conversation, talk somewhat over the top, as well as some implementation ideas for how to get multimedia into the PSAP. Talk a little bit about multimedia, some of the workflows for PSAPs, and then extend with some of the video, first responder, FirstNet, as well as some WebRTC. Really, part of the problem is defined by the following criteria. One, cameras and smartphones are nearly ubiquitous. When we first started the conversation a number of years ago, we were still at a point where, borderline camera phones, but now at this point, almost everybody's carrying a camera or smartphone. And there's a genuine need to acquire multimedia, but a lot of concern by public safety agencies in receiving it, whether it's pictures, recorded video, audio. I was in Toronto last week meeting with the Toronto Police Department 911. They are already using text messaging as part of a CRTC initiative, but they were very interested in pictures and video. It's come up lately in City Council. However, genuine concern about how we can get these pictures in a 911 in a solicited fashion, in a fashion that aligns with our current workflows. So they're really asking for help today. There are many PSAPs, in fact, probably most still at this point, that are not next-gen ready. They are not i3 ready. They're not an EZNet. So they're looking for something today that can solve the requirements as well as be a prelude into next-gen and be extensible. Call takers are also not ready for multimedia. The concern is not only the technology in the public safety agency, but the familiarity call takers have with the receipt of multimedia, how to triage it, what to do with it. So a genuine concern there as well. And a number of years ago, I went to one of the public safety agencies in Florida. Like many, they had a handset in the police department where they could receive pictures, and their predominant concern was that phone, which was just a phone sitting on one of the call takers' desks, could actually be part of evidence and taken into custody. So really, the handset in the PSAP is not the solution. Why pictures in 911? And this is just a little bit of the representation of what we've seen here working with the City of Chicago EMC. We currently have a solicited MMS process that's integrated with CAD, and essentially most of the pictures that come in are, kind of property damage. Another 20% is suspicious, suspects or individuals, and then lastly, crimes in progress. In fact, we had a call a few years ago. We had been working with the City of Calgary. Number of bank robberies. We know that Calgary, prior to the oil boom, was had seen a lot of wealth and prosperity, a number of bank robberies there, and what they deployed is actually a tablet in the PSAP to collect multimedia, and part of that led to an apprehension of subjects in a bank robbery. Now they're looking at something that's more integrated, which really is a subject of my presentation. Kind of the solution is a multimedia policy router. It's not a formal functional element. It's more over the top, very similar vein to what we've been talking about within the context of the previous presentation. Essentially an integrated software platform to acquire multimedia, not the mobile handset and the PSAP. There are a couple of different incidents. One is where multimedia is solicited by a call taker, but may be routed separately. Namely, overcomes the concerns of a call taker in receiving multimedia, but also solicited as a result of a 911 call, a text message, which is part of the new FCC initiative in combination with the wireless carriers, to route that media to detectives, surveillance groups, integrated with CAD or CP, so it's actually not part of the call, but may be wrapped into that CAD incident, available to first responders via mobile data. In the City of Chicago, as an example, it goes to the surveillance group and is reviewed there. In Calgary, I believe they wanted to route it to detectives. As part of even the new offering by West as part of its text to 911 solution for some of the wireless carriers, you're actually able to route that to an email address that would go to either a supervisor or to a detective. It may coincide with next generation, so I'm really talking about current technologies like SMS, MMS. It could extend to email, but there are certainly technologies that are accessible today, available for acquiring this kind of media, but I'll also talk a little bit about what next gen means, MMES, and some of the standards for the acquisition of next generation multimedia. And then really you're looking for maximum security and privacy. So There hasn't been a time that's come up where we're working with a public safety agency that's looking at multimedia and ask the question, are the contents of the message encrypted? Is there antivirus? Is it secure, et cetera? So those are all part of the concern of how do you accept that multimedia. And to the point before, we've been working with the city of Calgary. They're trying to separate the multimedia and the additional data onto their commercial network versus going into their call-taking 911 or fire network. And then lastly, certainly privacy concerns as well as parity. Multimedia comes in, you want to ensure that it all gets equal treatment, that there's privacy for the agent as well as the caller. So this is just a sample multimedia acquisition workflow, very similar to what we did with the city of Chicago, where a 911 call comes in. The call taker recognizes or talks to the caller. They indicate that there's some multimedia. The call taker then, via their CAD, and the city uses the Northrop CAD, they're able to send out a message, typically via SMS or MMS, to the wireless user. The wireless user responds, provides multimedia as a response. It's scrubbed from a security perspective and then brought back into CAD, so it's now part of that CAD incident and can be dispatched to a first responder via their mobile data terminal. The other thing is any of these processes that are solicited are also expired. So you can't just send a text or a multimedia or a video or a picture in. It has to be part of a process that's from a 911 call or 911 text, but has already been predetermined that this is a valid wireless user with a genuine concern. So as an example, in the city, they have an expiration period of 4 hours where any new multimedia after that point is no longer submitted, and they're requested to dial 911 again. Just to talk a little bit about solicited via unsolicited, and if we look at the normal I3 or the normal 911 call model, the model is you would dial or text or contact 911, location is acquired, it is routed based upon jurisdictional shape, it comes into an ACDQ or it rings all phones in the PSAP, call taker picks up the call or they open up that session and they're starting to communicate. But what it means is the call taker is now put in the front line of responding to that multimedia, whether it's a picture, a video, an audio file. And that may not be desirable. In fact, most call takers are not trained to do that. However, many dispatchers, detective surveillance groups are able to do that. So when I talk about an unsolicited process, it's where somebody has actually dialed 911, text 911, and the call taker has determined that they would like to acquire additional multimedia. So in the solicited process here, it uses standard call processing. The call taker is not responsible for the multimedia. In fact, to be out of phase, the call may be ended, the multimedia comes in, now it's made available to a detective or a dispatch group. In the unsolicited fashion, this is the picture coming into a call taker, or even video, whether it's pre-recorded or live video coming into a call taker. They're now responsible for triaging it. And if you've talked to any one of the 911 centers, I haven't spoken to one yet that is ready for live video coming into the public safety agency. Now, that being said, many of them, if asked, would you be interested in video, whether it's surveillance video or a citizen who has a smartphone and is able to provide even a live video feed from an incident, they're absolutely interested in it. So really, that unsolicited fashion, or pardon me, the solicited fashion solves some of those issues, at least today. Now, if you look at an I3 or next-gen world, that's not the typical call flow, but here you're offering the ability for somebody, even using next-gen type technologies, to be able to acquire that information today. So from a picture acquisition perspective, this is a solicited MMS. It's integrated with CAD. Basically, a message is sent out to the user, requested that they supply media. I'll show another instance where even they could do video. And then the response is, a picture of an accident, comes into the agency. It's associated with a CAD record. It's a URL, very similar to the proposal you had, where they're going an open link. It's secure. It's whitelisted. It may be coming over a VPN. But either way, there is some level of security associated with that over-the-top media. Now, in a next-gen world, it comes in an MES flow, or maybe binary data as part of a MIME message. But and again, this world where they have not yet deployed next-gen, or even at some point in the future, these are good ways to get information into a public safety agency that has IP access. And then lastly, the need for parity as well as liability. As I mentioned before, that camera in the PSAP sitting at a call taker's desk, can be taken in evidence. let's say a picture comes in and one call taker did not provide the appropriate triage versus another call taker that does, or video, you're not providing parity in the communications that come in. So, this is a strategy that essentially allows the call taker to make that determination that multimedia should be acquired, and for the citizen who provides it, it comes in, it's now attached to the record in a fashion that's similar to any one of the other callers who may have multimedia. So just here's a few channels, and ranging from what I'll call the from next gen. So essentially using next gen 911, an I3 compliant phone that may have whether it's an app or an IMS type app on there, or RCS as per our conversation yesterday with Nokia, comes in via MMES. You also have MMS, which is an MM7. It's actually part of very similar to SMS and the SSL SS7 signaling network. MMS over long code, short code, etc. So more over the top versus in 911. Email, which still works. It's IP related. You could secure an email server, create a one-off or a unique email address to which somebody could submit multimedia. If they submit it to something other than that, or after a 4-hour period, you would simply disable that email address. And then lastly, the website, which kind of dovetailing with Henning's comments before, you could secure a website, but you have to be careful of many of the OSWAP or the kind of top 25 criteria. So you could create a site that somebody could simply upload that multimedia. It could be one time expiring again, and you could securely bring that multimedia into PSAP, perform antivirus on it, and then make it available to a call taker or a dispatcher. So this is just an example of MMS and text to 911 as it exists today. Right now, Sprint is one of the only ones supporting MMS to 911, actually via the West or the Untitled TCC. AT&T announced earlier this year they want to do it. David, you may even know, I don't know if you have cellular, I believe they have plans to provide pictures and multimedia as well. Maybe not. But MMS includes either a picture, video, or audio. The current process for text to 911 is if a call taker can either solicit it or it comes in an unsolicited fashion. There's notification of the call taker of the multimedia, but not the actual multimedia itself. And then there's actually an email that could be determined by the PSAP where that multimedia would go. So notification of the call taker that there is multimedia, and then it could be routed to anyone via email. So it's a current implementation over the top using text to 911 to get multimedia into the public safety agency.
If they don't support MMS, they have to provide a bounce back, right?
Yeah, so there's actually a few different scenarios. So if MMS is not supported, they could provide a bounce back. If MMS is supported, it actually doesn't provide any bounce back. It would actually generate a call into the public safety agency. They could receive that, and they would also receive out-of-band this picture message as well. So yes, it depends on the agency. Some agencies accept it. They will actually come in as a SIP MSRP call with a notification that multimedia has been received, and if they choose to receive it, then it could come into this email. But it does provide a bounce back to the texter that nothing was received.
Jay, have you looked at or thought about automating this flow with a chatbot initially?
The chatbot for the call taker, you mean, or?
To replace the call taker. So you're going to ask, you're going to query the caller about different things. Have you thought about maybe automating that, or are you going to rely on a human to do that interaction?
So, in general, the interaction involves a 911 call taker. But that's not to say that if somebody were to supply multimedia or to supply multimedia to an agency that didn't accept it, it could provide that interactive flow. We actually built the flow for the City of Chicago 3-in-1, entirely different but more self-service, where it could maintain that entire interaction, including a picture at the end. So you can maintain an interactive flow, and that's one of the nice things about it. Could be in an IVR call. It could be in via text, where they start texting, and even for location, where and I haven't seen agencies want to do this, but I'm more surprised. But typically you get with a text message, you get the location. It does not use pure GPS, so it looks a lot more like phase one. It's tower based, and in that regard, I've always thought it would be worthwhile to immediately engage the texter if you don't get a particular accuracy for that location fixed. not only automatically rebid it, but then also ask the texter, what is your location, try to validate it, and then provide even additional text data to the caller. But, I haven't seen the agencies adopt that self-service model. They still view that there has to be this formality.
So one of the things that's available too with HTML5 is pretty much any phone you can send them a link that they click on, and you can get I call it Uber level accuracy, right? I'm on the left side of the street. It's scary, the level of accuracy. The biggest problem is, again, getting that data off the device in the field and into the system at the dispatcher, and getting them to push that link. Text to 911 is a great enabler of that.
Correct.
To build the bridge.
And even to that extent, and part of what we've done with a number of agencies and utilities and perhaps even 911 centers is allow them that text channel, perhaps even for after the call data. And one of those may be, where I'm trying to get additional locations. So part of it is I may send a link to that end user with the URL where I'm trying to get that HTML5 rich location. They could supply it within that text message by clicking on their browser. It opens up. It's a one-off, unique URL. I acquire that location, and now I have additional data that I provide to the caller. In the same way, you could do multimedia. So location is only another example. I mean, the reality is if they had a profile or any other information, it could be supplied into text, and the extent it could be secured, you could provide that there as well.
Again, and another concept we did that was built around that was, now that I'm loading a web page, I can have it executing HTML5 on the back end, but I can also enable buttons that allow you to click to fire off WebRTC.
And that's
now I've got this interactive.
Did you read my because that's where it's going. So essentially is sending out a unique URL that somebody could open up a WebRTC session. It's unique. It's one off to the call taker, so I've encoded it using like a bit.ly link, and now I'm able to maintain a WebRTC communication to a call taker, to a dispatcher, even to a first responder. So if we assume that first responder has WebRTC on their mobile device, and you have a gateway like a web session controller, and you could still do SIP on the core. So you do SIP on the core and WebRTC on the endpoint. And you're smiling because I think that's maybe what you're saying.
No, exactly. I could push a video. Here's how to do the Heimlich maneuver. Here's how to do CPR.
Exactly.
And I've got the audio connection.
No reason it has to be one way. It could be just as well two-way, where a call taker goes to their dispatch and pulls out a video or a link, and now is able to share it with that wireless.
That's it. That's what Bernard's got to add.
Not quite, though, because...
Sorry, I get... No, whatever's the best order.
Is there like a developer API here as well, so that rather than the individual sending an MMS, it may well be that for whatever reason they're in WhatsApp or they're in Facebook Messenger, it could be that they're in a location where there's Wi-Fi but no cell coverage or something like that. And then option, if you're WhatsApp or you're an enterprise unified comms provider, a Avaya or Cisco or whoever, you might end up being voluntarily or involuntarily an intermediary here. So have you got any, is there a sort of a path in from external applications?
Yeah, I mean, for an agency that is enabled, I mean, whether it's SIP or SIP MSRP, those are generally accessible technologies. WebRTC is not standardized within the i3 world. Certainly, I think there's some worthwhileness to consider it on the edge. That would be worthwhile. But there's really not a reason that if an agency could support many different app types, whether it's WhatsApp or BRIA or Counterpath, which are SIP MSRP clients, you can support multiple client types. And I know that there's even there's other providers of next-gen type even clients where they want to get onboarded. There's no reason you couldn't try to onboard those using a model where you're maybe soliciting it with an SMS or an over-the-top technology, and now bringing them into what looks like a next-gen, very IP-centric session. Are there any Nina i3 purists here? Because I have deeply offended many of them before with this concept over the top.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that you're offending them because they need to be offended. Because, what?
You're over it? It was built like a year or two ago, but now he's,
But I guess there still is a question, though, of how to formalize some of these concepts in a way that they can actually be used. Because WebRTC is not a monolithic thing. Having surveyed all the mobile apps, people pull from different builds of WebRTC. So There are folks out there writing very widely deployed apps based on 2013 code, or the people are 2016 code. They don't necessarily interoperate. So, and then you have versions of the browsers which can change on a daily basis and be auto-updated and break interop. So getting this into a framework where it'll provide a reliable 911 service is not all that trivial, but worthwhile, but not trivial.
I'd like to continue to bogart your presentation, which is very thought-provoking.
Please, you know.
The FCC just received 2 days ago from NASA, the National Association of State 911 Administrators, a request that the FCC take on regulatory rulemaking for 911 applications.
Yep.
To create a category of 911 applications so that consistency is there in an appropriate way that delivers confidence to the PSAPs. They know what they're getting, they know what to expect. Delivers confidence to the consumer that they're not going to be in one county and it works, in another county and it doesn't work. Yet still leave room for appropriate innovation and not chill this by just having us kick it to the I3 standard and hope that 10 years later we'll get perfect. So I expect we'll open up a docket on that, and we would love to get inputs from the ecosystem, as well as if there are any students in the audience, love to see, it's a great thesis topic, I think, and how we would approach that from a policy standpoint, achieving the consistency while allowing that fueling of innovation. So we're getting new, better ways, not having to wait for a perfect standard.
And I wish in part Trey was here, and Bill may echo.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I'll like it for the online audience. So, I mean, I wondered if Jay was going to get there. I think I just stole his thunder again.
No, that's fine. You could take.
We're all doing this to you, so I guess I should expect you to do it to me when it's my turn. Yeah, exactly.
Tough crowd,
But and I'm sure Admiral Simpson's aware of this as well, right? So at NINA last week at the Standards and Best Practices Conference, as well as the Critical Issues Forum, probably the #1 topic was applications. What do we do with them? What does it mean? What does the interface look like? Is it always Next-Gen 911? Is there room for other things? Is it all I3? I mean, so that topic is the topic du jour, and it's true globally too, right? I mean, there are obviously people in this room are aware that ENA and other organizations globally are looking at this as not just a U.S. only thing. I'm sure Bernard knows what James Winterbottom's up to, and Mark and everyone else in terms of the work that Europe's been doing with emergency management applications architecture. So it's a great thing to hear. I think it's commendable, right, that if you guys are going to put out a request for comments and start collecting information about this, it kind of is the topic du jour. And I think it's being driven by the fact that the Next-Gen 911, based on ENA I3, has taken so bloody long, pardon my British expression there, that people are looking for other ways around, because technology has not stood still while we've become what we didn't want to become. Again, Mark will remember this. When we started this at NINA in 2003, one of the things we had hoped to do was avoid the what's the word I'm looking for? Administrative overhead of traditional telco SDOs. And unfortunately, at 300 pages plus and growing, NINA I3 has become exactly what we didn't want it to become in some ways for all the good work that's been done. Yeah. So I think it's great that whether it's academia, government and regulators, the private sector, right, and things like you've been working on here, Jay, right, that try to push things forward with existing technology. This is the way to finally try to break the system open. A lot of us in this room were at the NG911 Now Coalition announcement in February. There's no way we're going to get to 2020 if everything has to be, as you so eloquently put it, purist NINA I3. We just won't get there.
I should qualify. I don't want to associate with I3 bashing, because I think I3 still has a definite role. But I do believe that we should look at NINA and APCO, all of us in the different stakeholders, a more different approach to standards, where instead of the prescriptive protocols, more of an app-oriented approach that defines the what, but leaves more of the how to innovators.
Yeah, and again, echoing what Bill said, I mean, there's definitely a need for some policy and even technology integration of public safety agency, and we have done it to the extent needed to deliver it via either CAD interfaces, any call handling vendor that we could work with on a web portal, integrated, very similar to the conversation that we had with Mark. And then through Next Generation, and several years ago at ICE, which is one of the NENA interoperability events, and not actually here, but in the west suburbs, we showed being able to bring a URL for a picture message as part of SIP message, which is one of the I3 standards. I think most of that has gone to more SIP MSRP, but nevertheless, you could even wrap multimedia, additional call data, whether it be in a P header, whether it be in the actual message body itself. We used an over-the-top, command PIX, which could be sent to a TCC or to a third-party vendor to acquire that multimedia. And then lastly, this is really MMES and how you could wrap multimedia into a SIP message, there as well, into the SDP. Yeah, so I'm just gonna skip some of the other components here, but this is actually where it was going, and I think we talked about it, was WebRTC. So I have just two slides I wanted to show. One is kind of what we talked about before, which is, somebody recognized there's multimedia. They send out a link to a wireless device that has a URL. That URL may open up an HTML5 rich browser. That browser then has WebRTC on there. Oops. WebRTC is fairly commercially available. Some of you have already done it on your tablet or on your browser with a contact center. Why shouldn't it be leveraged within the concept of Next Gen? So really part of this is converting web session into an existing SIP session, so you're able to bring WebRTC into the SIP core part of Next Gen. Lastly, a kind of an eye chart, but really that I3 core WebRTC on the edges, where you're able to acquire rich multimedia data, and then be able to acquire multimedia from first responders, put it on a map. Now you get that data that comes into the public safety agency, is delivered out to the edge to first responders using WebRTC, using that SIP core. And lastly, and I think this is the last slide, from a governance perspective, this is really where a lot of that policy issue with regards to apps, technology to bring it in, but again, maintaining parity, fairness, archive a lot of these multimedia, whether it's live recorded, live or pre-recorded information. It's not kilobytes like we did with pictures, but it's megabytes and perhaps even gigabytes that now needs to be stored. Archive, what are those policies? And then again, workflows, how to minimize this for a call taker, not having to triage a live recorded session, but get it to a first responder, to a dispatcher. And I think with IP technology, with Next Gen, it's much more available to do. And lastly, again, I was in a city down in Florida, and they're like, we could potentially have to give up the handset for which we've acquired a multimedia because it now becomes part of evidence. So that's it. So it's really a graceful transition, but I think via the conversation, we've all got an understanding that this is just one step towards Next Gen, using existing technologies, getting PSAPs ready for that multimedia, that additional call data. So with that, I appreciate it. I'll be around the rest of the day, so if anybody has any questions, or happy to facilitate what was a very interesting discussion. That's it. Thank you.